Hello everyone, I am the Passionfruit Whalrus and welcome to my review of Resident Evil VII Biohazard. Now I've played this game twice now and I found that it had the effect of being creepy from the word go on the second playthrough. And as a horror survival type game, I think that's actually a very good thing because even though you've played the game before and you know that nothing is going to jump out and attack you, you still get this sort of creepy little tingling feeling that something might anyway. And I'm not sure exactly how they've managed to achieve that effect, and it only seemed to be at the start of the game, and then it just sort of wears off a bit. But I found that quite impressive, and just that it gives you that sort of vibe to the game, and that's good. And on the second playthrough, it is that thing that you wouldn't expect that because you'd know what's happening, and yet you're still a bit sort of on edge. So that's a good feature of it, I think. Now the game focuses around the main character called Ethan, who is hunting down his girlfriend, who or possibly wife, I can't remember now, who disappeared a few years ago, and he's finally located her, and he's hunting around this weird mansion trying to find her. And the assorted monsters and stuff turn up shortly after. He gets abducted by this sort of psychotic and somewhat supernatural family, and manages to escape from them, and then starts hunting down his fiancée, wife, whatever, whose name I forget now, actually. Mia, that's the one. Yes, and they sort of moved a little bit away from the sort of zombie thing in Resident Evil 7. Now they're not really zombies, they are something called molded, which is basically some sort of fungus monster. And they're basically sort of big, slimy looking black things with absurdly large fangs. And the family members that are actually like basically the bosses of the game are sort of have superhuman powers in just really weird and sort of warped ways, but they also have their minds have just been sort of warped by the whole process, and they are just crazy psychotic characters that just are tormenting people and turning them into these sort of creepy mold monsters. Personally, I found the game very enjoyable to play, but I did find that the aiming and movement controls for Ethan are very awkward. I think it's done deliberately, but I still found it sort of spoils the gameplay a bit. Ethan moves absurdly slowly, like he's wearing lead shoes. So you try to walk and you just slowly move along a corridor. You realise that someone is behind you with a fucking chainsaw, and you try and run, and you move slightly faster along a corridor, which is extremely annoying, because you can sort of tell that he's not actually moving at a normal rate. He is just ambling. It's like, there is a maniac behind you trying to kill you. Run, you idiot. It's just annoying. Now, I think that's done to sort of increase the tension and make you scared, but I found rather than make you scared, it just frustrates you. It's just like, seriously, is this my top speed? You know, the old woman in the wheelchair can move faster than this. Aiming the gun is also quite awkward, I found, in that it's a bit slow, and I'm pretty sure it wobbles a bit when you actually try and aim and fire, which does make it a bit difficult because you have limited ammunition, and headshots are like one of the only things that works particularly well. You can sort of unload like loads of ammunition into the mold monsters, but they don't die very quickly if you do that, unless you're using some big weaponry. I also found that the monsters are a bit quiet in some respects, which does make it a bit awkward when fighting them. But that does also add to the horror element of the game, and unlike the movement, I find that does add a sort of creepiness thing to it, because you can just turn around and suddenly there's a monster behind you. And he didn't just pop into there from nothing, he was just sort of quietly walking up to you, which is quite a nice effect from a horror perspective. There is a sort of strange story arc, perhaps, with Mia, where she is both the damsel in distress and like the strong sort of action hero woman, because initially you go to rescue her and she is very much the sort of victim. She's scared. She's, you know, trying to escape with you, but then she also goes psychotic and tries to kill you. But then again, she's a victim again later on, and then suddenly she's toting a machine gun and just massacring monsters. And then suddenly she's the victim again. So there's this weird sort of up and down with her that's, I don't know, it's slightly interesting, but it's also a bit sort of inconsistent, where she's sort of simultaneously the victim and the action heroine. So that's an interesting thing that they've added to the game. One of the things that does happen with the game is that they leave sort of loose ends in the main storyline where they don't actually tell you what happens to certain characters. And from what I gather, I haven't actually played them, but I've looked at least one of them up, that the DLC actually covers some of this. But I find that does sort of fail a bit in the sense that it leaves the game that you actually initially buy as sort of lacking part of itself, and I don't think sort of hammering bits onto the game later to be a particularly good way of storytelling. And if you do that, I think you should sort of add something to the original story that wasn't there initially, rather than just sort of tie up loose ends that you couldn't be bothered to put in the original. So yeah, you leave I think there's about 3-4 characters that you just don't know exactly what happens to them. There's one of the girls in the house, part of the sort of mad family who's managed to resist it for a bit, the madness for a bit. You never find out what happens to her in the main game, but there is apparently a DLC about it. There's also one of the bosses who you never actually fight. You just have this weird little sort of encounter where you have to break out of one of the traps he set for you, and then that's it. You never see him again. So it's rather strange. You fight, I think, 2 or 3 bosses, and that's about it. The one of which actually doesn't even die properly in the main game, which is only sort of hinted at, and then they bring him back for the DLC, and it's just like, oh come on, doesn't this guy ever die? So yeah, a bit strange. Actually, now I'm actually saying this, I think the guy who doesn't actually die properly during the main game, you fight him twice, because he sort of dies then, but then you fight him again, and then he's reincarnated or something later on in the DLC. So yeah, very strange. Another downside to the game is that it is very short. It doesn't take long to play at all, and that I think is a bit of a downside, because you're just sort of getting into it and then it's over. I think really they should have included the stuff from the DLC into the main game, which would have padded it out and it would have been a more complete experience, because you'd have got to play as several different characters and you'd have actually had like the full story instead of just bits. There is quite an annoying part where they'll give you this quite high-powered pistol and about 4 rounds of ammunition, and as far as I know, that's the only 4 rounds you get in the entire game, unless I've missed them somewhere. But it's really depressing, because I got this fancy gun, I unlocked it, and I head out of the lift that I was in, and I walked into an area with several zombies. I headshot each one, perfect shot, instant kill, lovely, lovely gun. Brilliant to play with, great fun. And then 4 of them were dead, and I was out of ammunition. It's like, well, that was like 2 seconds of fun, and now I've got to go back to normal. So that was a bit rubbish, to be honest. I think they should have either not included it at all, or they should have just added more ammunition for it, made it more obvious that you can craft ammunition for it, or just supply it more regularly. Because, yeah, it's just disappointing otherwise. So if they release a Resident Evil 8, then I'd be interested to see what that's like, and hopefully it'll be fun to play. I thoroughly recommend Resident Evil 7, although I do find that there are some problems with it, as I've said. I hope that if they do a Resident Evil 8, that they will actually sort of keep to the same kind of thing, but improve some of the sort of movement and combat things to make it a bit easier. Well, not easier, but a bit more enjoyable to play, and also have a more complete storyline without trying to tack stuff on in the DLC at the end. Overall, I'd rate the game 4 passion fruits. If you've enjoyed the review and you'd like to see me playing the actual game, then please click the link and you can watch my exploits in Resident Evil VII. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share and subscribe, and please hit the infernal bell to be notified of every sort of new thing that I upload, which hopefully you'll be interested in. Yeah. I've been the Passionfruit Whalrus. Bye-bye for now.